Lena Whitmore dragged the last moving box into her new apartment, her muscles aching from the long day. She let out a sigh, pushing her hair out of her face. This was supposed to be a fresh start, new city, new job, new life. But right now, all she had was an empty apartment, an air mattress, and a box of takeout on the counter. A knock on the door startled her. She frowned, glancing around. She didn't know anyone here yet. When she opened the door, she was met with a tall, broad-shouldered man holding a toolset in one hand and a six-pack of sparkling water in the other. His dark brown hair was slightly tousled, and his sharp blue eyes held an easy confidence. "Hey, I'm Callum Vaughn." "I live across the hall," he said, offering her a small nod. "Figured you might need a hand. Moving in can be a nightmare." Lena blinked at him. He was effortlessly handsome, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in a magazine rather than an apartment hallway. Yeah, it's been a long day," she admitted. Callum glanced past her, taking in the half-unpacked boxes. "Let me guess, furniture still in pieces." She huffed out a laugh. "I thought I could handle it. Turns out I was very wrong." He grinned, stepping inside without hesitation. "You're in luck. I'm great with tools." Before she could protest, he was already rolling up his sleeves and heading toward the mess of screws and wooden panels that were supposed to be her dining table. "You don't have to do this," Lena said, crossing her arms. "I don't mind," Callum replied, kneeling down and inspecting the instructions. "Besides, neighbors help each other out, right?" Something about the way he said it made her relax. There was no arrogance in his tone, just pure confidence. She sat on the floor across from him, watching as he started assembling the table with practiced ease. "So, have you lived here long?" "Couple years," he said, tightening a bolt. "It's a good place, quiet but not too boring." Lena nodded. "That's what I was hoping for. I needed a fresh start." Callum glanced up, his eyes steady on hers. "Yeah," she hesitated, then shrugged. "Just needed a change." He didn't pry, just nodded like he understood. An hour later, the table was standing, sturdy and perfect. "Wow," Lena breathed. "That would have taken me all night." Callum smirked. "Told you I'm handy," she laughed, shaking her head. "I owe you one." "You can pay me back by not eating takeout on the floor," he said, nodding toward the counter. "At least use the table." Lena rolled her eyes but smiled. "Fine, want to join me?" Callum hesitated for half a second before pulling out a chair. Why not? As they ate, Lena found herself relaxing more and more in his presence. He was easy to talk to, charming without trying too hard, and genuinely helpful. Maybe moving here wouldn't be so bad after all. She had no idea that Callum Vaughn, the man who just built her table, was the CEO of Vaughn Enterprises, one of the most powerful companies in the city. And she had no clue that he was already falling for her. The next morning, Lena woke to sunlight streaming through her half-covered windows. Her body ached from moving, but there was a strange sense of satisfaction in it, like she was finally building something of her own. She stretched, remembering the unexpected company from the night before. Callum Vaughn, her neighbor, who had casually assembled her dining table like it was nothing. She shook her head, smiling to herself. He was handsome, sure, but there was something else about him. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, like he was used to taking charge without making a show of it. She had met plenty of cocky men before, but Callum wasn't trying to impress her. That made him all the more intriguing. By mid-afternoon, she was buried in job applications, her laptop open on the floor as she typed furiously. She had moved here for a fresh start, but that fresh start required an income. Her savings wouldn't last forever. A sharp knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Callum stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you could use a caffeine boost," he said, offering one to her. Lena accepted it, surprised by the gesture. "You didn't have to do that." "Consider it a welcome gift," he said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "How's the unpacking going?" she groaned, stepping aside so he could see the half-empty boxes still scattered around. "Let's just say the excitement wore off fast," Callum chuckled. "I know the feeling. Moving is all fun and possibilities until you realize you have to actually put everything away." Lena took a sip of the coffee, sighing in appreciation. "Okay, this is good. You know how to pick coffee." "I have my talents," he said, his expression amused. "So, what brought you here?" "If you don't mind me asking." She hesitated, wondering how much to share, but something about him made her want to be honest. I needed a change. New city, new opportunities. Just trying to figure out my next step. Callum nodded slowly. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what you need. She studied him. What about you? What do you do? His expression didn't shift, but there was the briefest pause before he answered. I run a business. Sounds important. It keeps me busy, he admitted, but I like it. Lena tilted her head. What kind of business? He took a sip of his coffee as if considering his answer. A little of everything. Investments, acquisitions, that kind of thing. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously vague. Callum's lips twitched. I promise it's all legal, she laughed. I'll take your word for it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before he glanced past her at the mess inside. Need help with the rest of the unpacking? Lena shook her head. You already built my table. I can't keep taking advantage of my neighbor's kindness. You could, he said, a teasing glint in his eyes. I wouldn't mind. She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. I'll manage, but thanks for the coffee. Anytime, he said, and for a moment he just looked at her like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. Then he nodded and turned to leave. As she closed the door, Lena found herself wondering about him. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he carried himself. He wasn't just some guy who lived across the hall. He had a presence, an air of quiet authority, and he was hiding something. She just didn't know what yet. A few days later, Lena was walking back from the small grocery store down the street when she spotted Callum standing outside the building, talking to a man in a sleek suit. The man was speaking in low, urgent tones, and Callum's expression had shifted into something colder, more calculating. She hadn't seen him like that before. As she approached, Callum glanced up and his entire demeanor changed. The sharpness in his eyes softened and he gave her a nod. Hey, she said, shifting the bag in her arms. Hey, he replied, his voice smooth, unreadable. The man beside him gave her a quick once-over before turning back to Callum. We'll finalize the deal tomorrow. Callum gave a curt nod. We'll talk then. The man walked away, disappearing into a sleek black car parked at the curb. Lena raised an eyebrow. That looked serious. Just work, Callum said easily. You get everything you needed. She held up the bag, enough to survive for a few days. I still need to figure out my way around the city. He glanced at her thoughtfully. I could show you around if you want, she blinked. You don't have to do that. I know, he said, but I want to. Something in his tone made her stomach flip. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. That sounds nice. Tomorrow evening. Tomorrow, she agreed. As she walked inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just agreed to something far more significant than a simple tour of the city, and she had no idea just how much her life was about to change. Lena adjusted the strap of her bag as she stepped out of the apartment building, scanning the street for Callum. A cool breeze rustled through the trees lining the sidewalk, the city humming with life around her. She hadn't been in town long, but she was starting to settle in, and tonight's outing felt like another step toward making this place feel like home. She spotted him leaning against a sleek black car parked along the curb, his phone in one hand, looking every bit like he belonged in some high-end advertisement. When he noticed her approach, he slipped the phone into his pocket and straightened. Ready for your tour? He asked. Lena nodded. Impress me. He opened the passenger door for her, a gesture so natural it didn't feel forced. She slid inside, taking in the immaculate leather interior. This wasn't just any car, this was the kind of luxury most people didn't casually drive around in. You've got nice taste, she remarked as he settled into the driver's seat. Good cars make life easier, he replied, pulling into traffic. That was an understatement, but she let it go, instead watching as the city unfolded outside the window. The buildings here were a mix of towering glass structures and older, brick-faced businesses. The streets pulsed with energy, people moving with purpose, the scent of fresh bread and street food mingling in the air. He took her through the heart of downtown first, pointing out hidden gems, a cafe tucked between two bookstores, a rooftop bar with the best view of the skyline, a street where artists set up their work on weekends. You sound like you know this city inside and out, she said as they drove past a small jazz club with warm, golden lights glowing through its windows. I've spent a lot of time here, he admitted, and I like knowing the details most people overlook. Something about the way he said it made her glance at him. There was always this air of quiet certainty surrounding him, like he was used to being in control. And yet, he wasn't overbearing about it, just steady. He pulled into a parking space near the waterfront and cut the engine. The river stretched out ahead of them, reflecting the city lights, boats drifting lazily in the distance. A small walkway lined with trees led toward a bridge that arched over the water, its lights twinkling like something out of a dream. "This might be my favorite spot," he said as they stepped onto the path. "It's quiet but not empty, peaceful but still alive." Lena took in the view, the soft hum of the city behind them, the occasional laughter of passers-by. "I can see why." They walked along the path, the rhythm of their steps in sync. "Have you always been in business?" she asked, curious about the man who seemed to have everything figured out. "For a long time," he said. "It started small, but I built it up over the years." She glanced at him. "That sounds like a careful way of saying you're more successful than you let on." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "I prefer to let my work speak for itself." "So mysterious," she teased. "Should I be worried that you're actually running some underground empire?" "Not quite," he said, his tone light, but there was something unreadable in his expression. "Just a regular business, nothing illegal, I promise." She studied him for a moment. He was holding something back, that much was clear, but rather than press, she let the conversation flow. They reached the bridge, pausing at the railing to take in the sight of the water stretching beneath them. A gentle breeze lifted her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear absent-mindedly. "You seem comfortable here," he observed. "I like it," she admitted. "Still figuring things out, but it feels right." "Good," he said, his gaze steady on hers. "You deserve that." Something about the way he said it made warmth bloom in her chest. They stood there for a while, the city humming around them, the moment stretching into something that felt significant. And for the first time in a long time, Lena felt like she wasn't just passing through, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Lena wrapped her fingers around the railing of the bridge, the cool metal grounding her as the city shimmered across the water. The night had stretched on longer than she'd expected, but she wasn't ready for it to end. There was something magnetic about being next to Callum, something unspoken that pulled her in. "You always work this late?" she asked, watching the reflection of the distant skyline ripple on the river's surface. "Most nights," Callum admitted, his voice smooth, steady. "But I don't usually take detours like this." She turned her head, meeting his gaze. "Then I guess I should feel honored." "You should," he said, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something intense, like he was seeing her in a way no one else had. A group of people passed behind them, laughter trailing in the air, but neither of them moved. The city existed around them, but here, on this bridge, it felt like they were in their own world. Lena exhaled slowly. "I don't think I've ever had someone show me a city like this before. Usually, it's just the tourist spots, the places people expect you to see." "That's not how you really get to know a place," Callum said. "Or a person." Something about the way he said it sent a thrill down her spine. She shifted slightly, angling herself toward him. "And what have you learned about me so far?" His lips curved just slightly, but not in amusement. It was something softer, something thoughtful. "You're stubborn. You don't like admitting when you need help, but you'll accept it when it's given with the right intent. You're careful but not closed off. You pay attention to details, even the ones most people don't notice." Lena blinked, caught off guard by how easily he had read her. "That's a little unnerving." "Why?" "Because I don't think most people take the time to see all that." "I'm not most people." No, he wasn't. She studied him, taking in the sharp lines of his face, the confidence in his stance. He carried himself with a kind of certainty that wasn't just about power, it was deeper than that. He wasn't just someone who had things handed to him. He was someone who made things happen. And yet, he had taken the time to bring her here, to show her something that actually mattered to him. "Why did you move here?" he asked, shifting the focus back to her. She hesitated, then answered honestly. "I needed a reset, new place, new opportunities. I didn't want to be stuck in a life that didn't feel like mine anymore." He nodded, as if he understood that feeling far too well. "And now," she glanced out at the water, "now I think I made the right choice." Callum didn't respond right away, but when she looked back at him, there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. A quiet intensity, like he was deciding something in that moment, something that had nothing to do with the city or the night and everything to do with her. "We should head back," he said, though he didn't sound like he wanted to leave any more than she did. Lena nodded, following him back toward the car. The ride home was quieter but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, the kind that felt like an understanding rather than an absence of words. When they reached their building, Callum parked and stepped out, moving to open her door before she even had the chance. "You don't have to do that," Lena said, though she couldn't deny the way her heart picked up speed at the simple gesture. "I know," he said, his tone even, "but I want to." She swallowed, stepping out onto the sidewalk. The air was cooler now, the city quieter as the night stretched on. They walked inside together, heading toward the elevators. When the doors slid open, they stepped in, the space suddenly feeling smaller than before. Lena pressed the button for her floor, glancing at Callum as he leaned against the opposite wall. The air between them was thick with something unspoken, something neither of them seemed willing to break just yet. When the doors opened again, they stepped out into the hallway, moving toward their apartments. Callum stopped in front of his door, turning to face her. "Lena." She met his gaze, waiting. "I meant what I said earlier, about you deserving this a fresh start." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, holding her gaze for a moment longer before finally unlocking his door. Lena stepped into her apartment, closing the door behind her and leaning against it for a second. Her heart was still racing, her mind still replaying every moment of the night, and she had a feeling this was only the beginning. Lena woke up the next morning with a pulse of energy running through her. The night before still lingered in her mind, the quiet tension on the bridge, the way Callum had looked at her like she was something worth paying attention to. She had never met someone like him before. He carried himself with effortless confidence, but there was something deeper beneath it, something he wasn't saying, and she wanted to know what it was. Determined to stop overanalyzing, she threw herself into her job search, sending out applications and scanning listings with a renewed sense of focus. But by mid-afternoon, she found herself restless, unable to shake the feeling that something was shifting, that her life had begun moving in a direction she hadn't expected. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, Callum stood there, dressed in a crisp, dark button-down with the sleeves rolled up, a watch peeking out from beneath the cuff. He looked like he had just come from a meeting, but there was no urgency in his stance, just quiet certainty, as if he had already decided something before he knocked. "I was heading out for coffee," he said. "Thought you might want to come." Lena hesitated for only a second before grabbing her keys. "I could use a break." The cafe he took her to wasn't one of the big chain spots. It was tucked away on a quiet street, the kind of place that had been there for years, where the baristas knew their regulars by name. The scent of freshly ground beans filled the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of baked goods. They ordered, and as they sat at a small table by the window, Lena studied him. "You know all the hidden spots in this city," she mused. Callum stirred his drink, his expression thoughtful. "I like places with character, the ones that don't try too hard to impress but end up being better than the ones that do." She tilted her head slightly. "That sounds like something you're not just saying about coffee shops." His lips quirked slightly, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "What about you? If you could be anywhere right now, doing anything, what would it be?" Lena considered the question. "Honestly, I just want to build a life that feels like mine. A job I actually enjoy, a place that feels like home, something stable, something real." His gaze didn't waver. "That's what you're doing now, isn't it?" "I'm trying." Callum nodded like he understood that better than she realized. "You'll get there." There was something about the way he said it that made her believe him. As they finished their drinks, a man in a sleek suit entered the cafe, his sharp gaze scanning the room before landing on Callum. Without hesitation, he strode over, his presence commanding. "Mr. Vaughn," the man said, his voice clipped. "We need your approval on the final contract before the board meeting." Lena froze. "Mr. Vaughn." Callum didn't even flinch. He glanced at the man, nodding once. "I'll handle it soon." The man hesitated, then gave Lena a quick, assessing look before nodding and stepping away. Lena turned to Callum, her mind racing. "Mr. Vaughn," Callum exhaled, setting his cup down. "I was going to tell you." She folded her arms. "Tell me what exactly?" "That I run Vaughn Enterprises." The name hit her like a jolt. She had seen it before on buildings, in news articles. Vaughn Enterprises wasn't just any business. It was one of the most powerful companies in the entire city. Lena shook her head slightly, trying to process. "You're the CEO." "Yes." She stared at him, trying to reconcile the man who had built her dining table with the one who apparently controlled an empire. "You never thought to mention that." Callum held her gaze steadily. "I didn't want it to change things." Lena let out a breath, trying to gather her thoughts. I didn't expect this." "I know." She studied him, searching for the catch, but he wasn't smirking, wasn't trying to charm his way out of it. He was just watching her, waiting. "And that's what made it real." Lena exhaled slowly. "So what now?" Callum's expression didn't shift. "That depends on you." She could have walked away, could have let the weight of it push her back into the safe, predictable space she had been trying to build, but she didn't want to. Because Callum Vaughn might be a billionaire, but he was also the man who had helped her move in without hesitation, who had shown her the city through his own eyes, who had listened, really listened, when she talked about what she wanted. And that was worth more than his last name. Lena met his eyes, her decision settling into place. "Then I guess we'll just have to see where this goes." Callum's expression softened just enough for her to catch it, and for the first time, Lena realized he hadn't just been waiting for her reaction. He had been hoping. Lena sat across from Callum in the cafe, the weight of the revelation between them settling like an unseen force. She had come here thinking she was getting to know her charming, helpful neighbor, only to discover he was one of the most powerful men in the city. And yet, as she looked at him now, his expression steady, waiting for her reaction, she realized something unexpected. He didn't feel any different to her. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" she asked, stirring the last of her drink absent-mindedly. "I knew you would eventually," Callum admitted. "But I wanted you to see me first, not the name attached to me." Lena tapped her fingers against the table, considering. "And what exactly did you want me to see?" Callum leaned forward slightly. "The same thing I've been seeing in you, someone who isn't afraid of a challenge. Someone who wants more than what's expected of them, someone who doesn't care about titles or bank accounts." She exhaled, searching his face. "And what if I had cared?" His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Then I would have walked away." Lena wasn't sure why that answer settled something inside her, but it did. He wasn't trying to win her over with wealth or power. He had been waiting to see if she was the kind of person who would look past all of that. And somehow, that made him even harder to resist. She glanced out the window, watching people pass by on the street, unaware of the moment unfolding inside. A few days ago, she had been just another newcomer trying to find her place in the city. Now, she was sitting across from a man who had the power to change everything. But did she want it to change? "You don't seem surprised," Callum observed. Lena looked back at him. "I think I already knew there was something different about you. The way you carry yourself, the way people react to you, it makes sense now." And she let out a slow breath. "And I don't know what this means yet, but I do know I don't want to walk away." A flicker of relief passed through his eyes, so subtle she almost missed it. "Then we figure it out," he said simply. Lena nodded, feeling something settle in her chest. She wasn't sure where this was headed, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the uncertainty. The next few weeks passed in a blur of late-night conversations, shared moments, and quiet realizations. Callum didn't push, didn't try to dazzle her with extravagant displays of wealth. Instead, he let her see him, the man behind the empire, the one who preferred quiet cafes to flashy events, the one who listened when she spoke. And Lena found herself falling. It wasn't just the way he looked at her, or the way he always seemed to know exactly what she needed to hear. It was the way he made her feel like she was stepping into something real, something worth holding on to. One evening, as they walked along the river again, Callum reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. The touch was effortless, natural, like it had always been meant to happen. Lena glanced up at him. "What happens now?" Callum stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The lights from the city reflected in his eyes, but his focus was entirely on her. That depends on you, he said quietly. Lena swallowed, her heart pounding. I don't need grand gestures or promises you can't keep. Callum's grip on her hand tightened slightly. I don't make promises I can't keep, and I don't need grand gestures either, I just need you. The words sent a rush of warmth through her. Then I guess you have me, she whispered. Callum didn't hesitate. He reached up, cupping her face gently before leaning in, capturing her lips in a kiss that felt like it had been waiting to happen from the moment they met. It wasn't rushed or uncertain, it was steady, sure, and filled with everything they hadn't said out loud. When they pulled back, Lena let out a breathless laugh. That was unexpected. Callum's lips brushed against her forehead. Not to me. Time moved forward, and Lena found herself slipping into a life she had never imagined but couldn't picture any other way. She found a job she loved, built friendships, and most importantly, found herself in something she had never truly trusted before: love. Callum was still Callum, strong, steady, but with a softness he reserved only for her. And she knew, without question, that he wasn't just offering her a place in his world. He was building something new with her. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Callum took her to the rooftop of a quiet building overlooking the skyline. A small table was set up, candles flickering in the breeze. Lena raised an eyebrow. Planning something? Callum pulled her closer. Always. As they stood there, wrapped in the fading light of the evening, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Lena's breath caught. Callum opened it, revealing a simple but stunning ring. I don't want to be just a part of your life, Lena. I want to build it with you. Will you marry me? Tears pricked at her eyes, but she didn't hesitate. Yes. Callum slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss, sealing a promise that had been forming between them from the very beginning. And as they stood there, the city stretching out around them, Lena knew this was exactly where she was meant to be.